It is back to school season once again, and today I want to talk about note-taking. I know, everyone's favorite topic, because the answers to how to take great notes are always so specific and understandable. There was some sarcasm there. Today, I'm going to talk about how to take notes and improve on your note-taking abilities if you just need a little brush up. So sit back, grab a pen, and practice with this video. By the way, I'm Terrell, and this is Absolutely Studying. I bootstrapped my way through university while juggling a full-time job and a family. It was tough, but now I want to pay it forward. I want to provide you with the resources and support you need to flourish in your academic career. Today, we're doing some note-taking tips. So again, grab a pen, let's go. The first and most important note-taking strategy that I have to tell you is to never, regardless if you write by hand or type, never copy it down verbatim. Copying down notes verbatim is not going to necessarily help you to remember. This is because you start going into a transcribing process. When you transcribe, you're not thinking about the words at a higher level. So you're not really taking them in the first time, which is doing yourself a huge disservice. Try your best to paraphrase. So that just means don't write things down word for word. Write down what the professor or instructor is trying to say in your own words, and hopefully you can say it in less. One perfect example of paraphrasing is how I am going on and on and on about how you should not write things down verbatim. Instead, write them down and rephrase them. So instead of writing all this whole description of what I'm saying with not writing it down verbatim, instead in your note, you might just say notes equal not word for word, which brings me into my next tip, which is developing a solid shorthand. And that shorthand does not have to mean anything except for to you. Shorthand is really important when you need to shorten a sentence or even a couple of words to allow you to write them down better. This works best with shorthand, but if you type them out, there's no reason you can't also use certain shorthands. The number 2 for TO or TOO, the number 4 for 4 or 4. You can use things like that. Equals can also mean the same thing related to or the same as or equals. These simple forms of shorthand can really help you to get through the writing process and the taking down of your notes faster so that you can paraphrase and rephrase and spend that mental activity on rephrasing. Now, I know it seems intimidating adding shorthand into your note-taking because then you have to remember the shorthand. But if you start doing it consistently, it becomes another language and you just kind of naturally do it. So it might seem a little clunky the first or second time you do it, but it does get better with practice. So now, as you are going through and you are paraphrasing and using your shorthand, the next thing you have to listen for is what is actually important. What pieces of important does the instructor continually hammer on and bring home and repeat? Because those things are the things you really want to write down. By writing the most important topics down, it gives you a little bit extra time to write those topics and focus on writing those theories, and you can let go of some of the less important ones. For example, if the professor is recounting something, a personal experience, you don't necessarily have to write that down. They're probably not going to test you on it. But the concept that they were explaining right before they related it to their own personal experience is probably incredibly important. And that's why they are following it up with an example in the form of their story. So writing all of the details you can pull from the concept they were just talking about and now relating a personal story to is really where you should invest your time. So really focus on the most important topics of a lecture and let go of some of the more benign or not so important parts so that you can really write down the details where you need them. If the professor writes something on the board or breaks out and starts drawing a diagram, however, get that down. That is going to be really important. These are the things they often go back and create their exams on. So creating and copying down these charts or diagrams or definitions that they put up on the board are going to be massively important. When I handwrote everything. I had my favorite pen and I used that black pen to write down all of my notes. However, I would bring a couple of highlighters in specific colors and a red pen just in case. This is going to help you really draw attention to some points. There are going to be times where the professor says, this is going to be on the exam, and you best believe that I grabbed that highlighter and I circled that concept because they already told me, I've already been warned, I need to understand that concept. And relying on my own memory hours later to remember that this is the specific sentence that the professor said we were going to get tested on is not reliable. Instead, I would write a little note to self, which I did all the time. I always wrote little notes to self in my notes if I understood something, or especially if I didn't understand something. And that's okay. If you can incorporate the use of colors easily and that it doesn't create a burden on you, then go ahead and try introducing that as well. A couple of things that are not important in note-taking. One, your handwriting. Scribble. Make that as messy as you need to, as long as you can understand it. Don't worry about writing perfectly aligned and beautiful notes. You can do that later in your study session, which is actually a great study activity. Instead, just get it down on paper and don't worry what it looks like. It can be written sideways, it can be written upside down, it doesn't matter. Write what you need to get down, and that's the important thing. Next, never stop writing. Just keep writing, and even if it is just to continually put down your internal notes or describe something, keep your hand moving at all times. This is not necessarily the place for me to have the conversation of note-taking by hand versus by laptop. I do have another resource where I've discussed that down in the description, whether it's better to take notes by hand or by laptop. So I will link that there if you want to get in on that discussion. But just if you're typing, keep typing. If you're writing, keep writing, and don't stop. Also, don't worry about spelling. If you can't spell something, put a little star, highlight it, write SP ? Spelling shorthand ? And move on. It's not the time when you're trying to capture ideas to nitpick about spelling and grammar. Don't use full sentences. Don't correct your spelling. Just move on. These are all things that can be cleaned up afterwards in the actual consolidating of notes phase when you put your notes together with your textbook. So now I know you're going to say, these are all still vague. How do I write notes? And the answer to that is practice. Just practice. If you were taking notes during this, you would have got the big overarching ideas and wrote those down as I discussed why they were happening. You would have wrote down, don't worry about spelling, as I described why spelling is not important. You would have noted, bring highlighters and use for important information, while I described why I use highlighters and how they can be beneficial in the studying and note-taking process. You would have written down, don't write verbatim, or notes equal not verbatim, as I described why it was important not to. And then as I went off and kind of added some cushioning material underneath that, you could have added a couple of reasons as to why. This is so important. This is how note-taking occurs. The easiest form of note-taking is the outline method, which is literally where you put the big idea, so don't write verbatim, and then smaller ideas underneath it. Instead, use shorthand and abbreviations. Add details as needed. Don't stop writing. These are all ideas that go underneath that don't write verbatim. Or you might classify them as important ideas on their own and write those down point form instead if you found those specific details important enough to have their own bullet point. That is how notes are written. These other points are really just to help you take them as effectively as possible. I hope this is helpful. I hope I dished out all of the secrets, and I hope you were able to practice your note-taking strategy on this video, where it's not quite as important before you have to head back into class and do it for real. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I put out new videos every week, and they are always about study tips, organizational hacks, and homework help to help you through the study struggle. You can also visit my website. I have tons of useful resources and articles to help you navigate back to school. And until next time, I hope you have an amazing adventure.